Well, welcome back to a new episode of the Threshold Lab, and I'm really excited today because what you'll see is this is the start of kind of a brand new series on this show. This is where we're going to start some conversations with some people that I admire and respect greatly, and learn a little bit more about their coaching identity and how they view leadership, and just kind of take a deep dive into the inner game of coaching here in this season one of interviews. And today's conversation is actually extra special for me because I'm interviewing and conversing with somebody that's had a massive impact on me and my own growth and personal and professional development in Scott Brosius. So, Scott, welcome to the show, and thank you so much for being here.
No, pleasure's mine, Zach, and likewise. There's guys that come through our programs over the years, and there's some that kind of stand out a little bit in terms of how they went about their business, how they played, and what they've done and accomplished beyond. And so, the pleasure's mine to be chatting with you today.
Yeah, this is the fun part about this is I get to ask some questions that I realized I was like, man, I haven't asked you some of these before, and I think some of that is shame on me, and some of them maybe we'll throw some curveballs in late just to keep you on your toes and pull out some memories together. But overall, I'm just super excited, and I know, recently within the last kind of year or so, you've transitioned to a new role back on campus at Linfield University as the VP athletics. And so, before we kind of jump into the world of coaching and leadership, I'm just curious, like, how's that shift been going from being a coach to a role now that really is supporting coaches across all different sports on campus?
Yeah, no, quite. It has been a shift for sure. It's my third go around here on campus, both as a player here at Linfield, then as the coach, and now as the athletic director. And for me, I think the thing that most excites me about the idea of coming back in this role is I still do see myself as a coach. I see myself as coaching coaches now, and so being in that position. I've been where they're at. I've kind of done it, had some experience there, and now being able to kind of be on both sides of I guess kind of the conversation, so to speak, in terms of running the athletic department as a whole, but also being able to hopefully put myself kind of in coach's shoes, know kind of what they're going through, and then maybe help kind of direct them maybe through some of the things that coaches at any level, but it's certainly at the Division III level. They wear a lot of hats, a lot of things going on in their lives, and so that part's been great. The transition into a little bit more of the office work and meetings and things like that. There's times where I miss wandering around on the field and being in the dugout, but I've enjoyed the transition to this point.
When you kind of think back, you're not terribly far removed from coaching, but certainly things can shift fast in the realm of coaching. And so I'm curious, like, in this early stages of this transition to this role, what are some of the differences or similarities that you're seeing with challenges and things that the current coaching staff is navigating that in comparison to what you experienced?
Yeah, I think some of the things that are similar to start with, just again, being a Division III school, budgets are always going to be a challenge we have. That the idea of how can we do more with less, and at the college arena now with enrollment issues and challenges there, we're in the midst of across the campus having to make some cuts. And so where does athletics fall? Into that, and so just trying to navigate those waters. I think that is always a challenge for our coaches here to be successful with having to fundraise and having to do your own travel, do all those type of things. I think one of the things that's changed a little bit is the athletes, and all this kind of trickles down, I think, from the professional level down through. But I think you see the athletes a little bit more now, where they see themselves as kind of their own entity. I kind of called them, just where when I played and years ago, you were part of whatever system, whatever program that you were in. You were, when I played, I was an Oakland A, I was a New York Yankee, I was a Linfield Wildcat. Now I think there's a little bit more guys see themselves as individual contractors, kind of looking for opportunities in the next place. And so I think there are a little bit more challenges now for the coaches to build the kind of the team framework and doing things for for the good of the team, for others, versus just about their own personal journeys. And so I think there's a little bit more of the challenge in that area right now.
Yeah, yeah. I think that it makes a ton of sense, especially and when there's so many team sports on campus, and that I think it especially gets heightened in that team sport setting where you have individuals now. It's in essence like these our student athletes nowadays are their own brand in a lot of ways, and I think it's certainly generated so many positives and so many great things for student athletes across the country, and it raises challenges too. And sometimes the thing that I'll have conversations with coaches about is sometimes there are unintended consequences. Things of we have very positive intentions, and then we realize down the road that there have been some unintended consequences with change. And it feels like in talking to coaches, there's certainly some of that at play right now.
Yeah, great way to put it. No question about it. That again, the opportunities, the things that are available out there for student athletes, better than ever. And along with that, there's some benefit to that. Players come in, they're talented, they've been playing, they've been playing year round in some cases. There's pros and cons to that. But again, the unintended consequences are that balance between, okay, that as we're out there trying to, drive our own personal opportunities, how do we do it within the context of the team? And even more importantly, how do sometimes we put ourselves second to put the team first? And so that becomes a little bit more challenging in today's world.
Mm-hmm. We'll circle back, I think, towards the end of this conversation to your role and kind of some of the specific things. I know you've been working behind the scenes and now starting to do a lot of different initiatives to help the staff and coaches there on campus, and we'll circle back to that. But I wanna turn it more to you, and this is where I'm like, there's some questions in here that I'm really excited to ask because. I think I've heard glimpses or small previews and sound bites of it, but some of which will be completely new even for me. And so I kind of want to start at the beginning, bro, and just where would you say your kind of origin story as a coach really began?
Yeah, that's such a good question because in when I saw that question, as we were talking, it kind of made me stop for a quick second and think about like truly where did it start? Because I can think of a time where I ultimately made the decision or the recognition that I wanted to be a coach, but I think it actually started way before that. I think about, and I guess I'll start with first, when I was done, when I finished my playing career, I didn't really end my time as a player with a specific goal of like, okay, I'm going to go into coaching. I just knew it was time for me to step away from playing. I needed to be home with my family and just everything that went with playing, but I didn't really have, okay, here's what's next, and so that kind of developed a little bit over time. And so as I was home and coaching my kids and just doing all the fun little league stuff, I really kind of started asking the bigger questions. Okay, like what's next? What's next for me? And really what I kept coming back to was this question was that if I hadn't gotten the opportunity to play professionally after my time at Linfield when I was a player, if I just, like most of us, just had graduated, moved on, and now was just, what would I be doing? Like what would I be doing if I hadn't played? And I kept coming back to I'd be teaching and I'd be coaching. And so that was kind of the moment where I like, then go do that, because that's kind of your wiring. That's what you love to do. You're passionate about the game and being on the field with the guys. So go out and do that. And so that's kind of the moment for me. But I think much earlier there's other deeper times. There's times all the way to when I was 10, 12 years old and used to go to baseball camps, and just these coaches that would just speak life into me, like, you are going to be a player. Those type of things where build you up, the self-esteem, the belief that you can do this. I think about my time here at Linfield with Scott Carnahan, and kind of this, Scott Carney was my coach when I played here, and then I coached for him, and then he coached for me. So this amazing kind of full circle with him. But just the number of times over the years that my relationship with him, I think, really also kind of directed my path into coaching. And then even some of the coaches I had along the way that maybe at the time I didn't really realize it, but I'm like, yeah, they played a part in that ultimate decision to do this.
I think for a lot of players as they transition into the coaching ranks, I think something that you kind of hear early on is they kind of almost copy their mentors. They copy those that they seen. It's all they kind of know, and you kind of learn what you like and what you didn't like.
Mm-hmm.
Who were some of, I think you touched on it a little bit there, but who were some of those mentors that you really tried to copy or borrow from as you started to build your coaching identity? And with that, as well as what specifically was it that they did that was important that you tried to pull from them?
Yeah, I love that question, because I think you're right. You use the word copy, and I think, yes, in some ways, but also I think I think you use your experiences and you remember, okay, this is something that I like. This is something that maybe I didn't appreciate as a player. So yeah, you pull both the positive and the negative experiences, and that definitely shapes in who you want to be. And so I think about even, in the big leagues, I basically had three managers in the big leagues: Tony La Russa, Art Howe, and then Joe Torre, and all of them very different. Where Tony, I couldn't imagine somebody probably more focused, prepared, than he was, but also maybe not quite as personal in terms of it was, especially with the younger guys, it was kind of the you're to be seen, not to be heard kind of mentality, the old school mentality. And so at times communication really lacked. Like I was never specifically told, I was hinted, but never specifically told that I made the big league roster out of spring training my first year. So that last week, and now you see guys film it and all these different things. I was literally never told that, yes, you made the roster and you're going to Oakland. So I was kind of sitting there in limbo, and so for me, you just kind of lock that in a little bit and say, I'm going to always make sure I communicate better than that. Good news, bad news, regardless. I want to be honest. I just want to be open with how I communicate. And I fast forward to Joe Torre, and here we are in this the stage of New York, and all the kind of the craziness and everything that can be that stage. But here is a guy that was able to slow it down, was able to connect with all of his players very personally. For me, very much so, just as I went through, my dad just getting sick and dying from cancer over my first couple of years there at New York. Just the freedom that he allowed me to have to go and see my dad, for example, before he passed away. That doesn't happen all the time, and so I definitely take from that. I take from just you have to try to, as best you can, try to connect with people beyond the playing piece of it and on the personal side of it, and then just he had the ability to say the right thing at the right time. He kind of knew guys and then kind of communicate that way. So I think you take, like I said, you take from your experiences, and you copy, and that's what I try to do. I try to be honest. I try to be, open with guys, and let them know that, outside of playing and winning, yes, that's important. We're trying to be the best team that we can be. We want you to be the best that you can be, but you're a person, and you're not just a player. And so try to connect at a little deeper level.
With that, and I think you hit on this right at the beginning where you said, like, you certainly there's an element of you're copying and borrowing and stealing, so to speak,
Yeah.
from these mentors and things that you like and things that resonate for you. And along the way too, I'm sure, as you mentioned, you pull from your own experiences to kind of start to find your own authenticity as a
Mhm.
leader, and you find kind of your own identity and style. So could you tell me a little bit more about how maybe you started to define, like create that authenticity for you and how you developed your own kind of unique identity as a leader?
Yeah, I think for me, it did, I guess, kind of maybe the foundation of how I guess, approach coaching or how I approach talking with guys even was I tried to make sure I never forgot how hard the game was. As a player, I think as a coach sometimes it's easy when you're not in it anymore. You're a little bit separated and you're watching and you're like, how could that happen? That it's easy to forget that the game is hard. And so I always try to remember the time that you did that. Remember the time that you made that mistake. Remember the time that you made that mistake more than once. Remember the time, just understanding. Joe Torre would come up after an 0 for 4 game and he'd say, yeah, I remember, whatever, striking out 3 times and hitting a double play, and so that type of thing that you just remember that the game is difficult. And so I say that because I think for me, foundationally, I tried to put myself in my players' shoes and try to remember this is what it was like for me when I played here. This is what it was like, this situation. This is what it feels like. I've been there. This is what it feels like. So now how can we help them to work through that? But also, I think over the years, I was very frustrated with, and this is what the minor leagues is in a lot of ways, is guys with lots of talent that maybe didn't apply themselves the right way, that didn't max out who they could be. And so for me, that was one of the most frustrating things that I saw was, don't waste it, and so when I saw at times talent or opportunities getting wasted, I just didn't want that for our teams and didn't want that for our players. I wanted us to go out there when it was all said and done to be able to look back and say, yeah, we did it. We did everything we could. This is where we landed. We can feel good about that.
Mm. I think one thing that you're kind of highlighting here too is as a coach, you in essence set like the temperature for your team, right? Like you are the one that you're the thermostat, right? That kind of dictates and sets the tone. And I think with that too, part of that is on one hand what you mentioned of recognizing how difficult the game is, and as you pointed out, the further you get away from that, like the further we've had this conversation internally about, the further you get away, the less and less you have moments of like discomfort or like really like stepping outside of your comfort zone. But as a player, like that happens on a day-to-day regular basis.
Yeah.
And so I'm kind of curious for you, and this is maybe a slight pivot where we were going to go, but I'm curious, like, what were ways as a coach that you tried to step outside of your own comfort zone or do things that might have been at the time a little bit uncomfortable, just to get the most out of your players?
Yeah, I think it is a responsibility of a coach to understand their guys and how to get the most out of them. There's some guys you can put the clamps on a little bit. There's some guys that you're better off not doing that, And so I think we do have to understand how to reach each guy. I think again, I tried to pull from my own experience that I thrived in an environment where I was allowed to, like in New York, be myself, go out there, enjoy playing. It didn't mean I wasn't a fierce, competitor, but enjoy the game and see those kind of tense moments as just awesome opportunities. Like, listen, we're here, we're on TV, we get a chance to play in the World Series. This is a great thing, not something to shy away from, but something to kind of attack. And so I think that's for me that I just based on how I felt that's what I wanted. So probably the most uncomfortable thing for me, I'd say, or I won't say most uncomfortable, but something that I had to watch all the time was like as the games got more important, so to speak, or as the times came where it was easy to kind of clamp a little bit, I tried to portray like even more relaxed or more fun. Like we would, the first time that we played Shagger, you would know Shagger. The first time we played that was the first regional we went to. because I could just see that the guys were, and I'm like, we got to have a little fun right here. Like we've got to just create a little bit of loose and so that was the first time that we played that. And so it's one thing I learned over time was create fun, create kind of cool competitions within practice that allow guys to get comfortable kind of just having a little bit of pressure on them, but in a way that they don't feel like they have to shy away from it, that we can embrace it.
Yeah, there's the cliche that the umpire says play ball, not work ball,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And just about how quickly we lose that. And I was
Mhm.
having this conversation with a coach just a few days ago who does a little bit of lessons with young kids on the side, and we were talking a little bit about he was just saying how so many of these kids are coming to him with just loads of pressure, loads of stress that, and unfortunately some of that is parents who have the best intentions, but unfortunately sometimes you don't realize the weight you're adding to your kids' shoulders. But one thing that he shared that really resonated was he's like, I want them when they show up and they use the cage at my house, is like I want them to feel like they're at the playground. Like I
Mhm.
want them to feel like they're just at the sand lot in the backyard having fun. Like we're gonna ramp up the challenge. Like it is gonna be challenging, but like we're never gonna lose sight of that because as a kid, you grow up, you envision yourself, hitting a home run or a big hit in the World Series in the biggest moment. You don't picture the game in June, day game, getaway day, like fifth inning. Like that's not what we grow up visualizing, but we kind of lose sight of as we get older. These pressure moments are the ones that we prayed for.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if we can somehow unlock that, these bigger moments or these what pressure situations, whatever you want to call them, we embrace that as this is what we did all the work for. This is what, all those rainy mornings and, in inside, indoors and, whatever it is, all the work that we put into it is to lead to you being prepared for this. So have fun with it. Even and this is where we get caught up, I think, as coaches in players too. Even the most important things in our worlds, whether baseball wise, whether that's the World Series, whether whatever, we're going to hold on to that for sure. But the people next to us, it's forgotten. Like they've moved on. Like they don't. Who's going to tell us who won the 2006 World Series if I just walk down the street? The people who participated in it for sure, but most everybody else, it's a memory for them, and so we make these moments so big sometimes, and like I said, it comes from this unfortunate, like we're told we have to be or we have to achieve some sort. No, we don't. We just have to go out and compete. We just have to go out and be ourselves and be the best version of ourselves out there. But ultimately, we have to look forward to those moments. We can't look at them as something we want to shy away from.
Yeah, and I can hear there's a lot of freedom in that. And I know you mentioned playing under Joe Torre, that certainly was what it felt like and some of the things that he did so well, for you and I know countless others too. So and I'm curious, kind of going back to your own coaching career as you kind of reflect back because you've had some different stops and worn some different hats even as a coach
Mhm.
since your playing career. But when you reflect back on these different experiences, are there any moments, like any significant moments that really stand out to you that kind of help shape who you were as a coach or as a leader?
There were, and they may not seem like big moments, but they were for me. The first moment for me as a college coach was my first senior day, because I signed after my junior year. So I got the opportunity when Oakland drafted me. I didn't have a senior season. I moved on. I continued playing, and so my first year back coaching, when I watched the emotion of senior day, and saw what it meant to the players and saw what it meant to the families, it really kind of stopped me in my tracks. The first one I was tearing up watching it because you just realize what this means to the guys, and it comes to an end, that it doesn't get to continue on forever, and so senior day, the first senior day, made me realize it's about the ride. It's yes, there's going to be a destination. It's every year we hope there's a destination we're going to get to, but when it's all said and done, it's about the ride. And so that was important to me, because like I said, I know I was competitive and I wanted our teams to be competitive, and I had to catch myself at times to just make sure that you're keeping all this in perspective a little bit. So that was one thing for me. And I think another thing, it was my first year that I really learned from, was just not allowing emotions of a game to impact how you communicate to teams and stuff like that. So my first season ended in the Division III World Series, and we got eliminated in the third game. So, but the game ended with us missing a play offensively in the ninth inning that would have tied the game up. And so the game ends, and I'm frustrated, and we leave the field, we go up and start talking about the game right away. And as I look back on it, I'm like, I made that player feel really bad. And I wasn't trying to necessarily, I wasn't trying to, but just the way I expressed my frustration. We practiced this all year long, and here we're in this place, and then we didn't get it done. And I crushed this guy. And I went back to the room, and I'm like, it's just one of those things that catches you. Like that is not how you communicate. Like you've got to make sure that your emotions are in check. You've got to make sure that you've had a chance to process. And so yeah, I don't know if you'd remember that we didn't necessarily meet right after a game. We would always put the field to bed, or we would, if we were on the road, we'd meet in the hotel later that evening. It was a time where I had a chance to kind of catch perspective and things like that, and not ever react that way again. And so that was something, those two things for different reasons, I think really stood out to me, because it was early, and it shaped, I think, what I did, from beyond that.
I don't know that I had heard that before, but I can certainly reflect back and feel some of that. I've had people ask me, like, over the years, like, oh, what was it like to play under Bro? And there was my mind always goes to a few core things, but one of which that I felt like I always would highlight is I can't recall many, I don't even know if I can even reflect on one where there was a post game talk where I'm like, you didn't say what needed to be said, and sometimes that certainly were moments where you challenged us. Those were certainly moments where you reminded us to take a step back and see what we were doing from a different perspective, and kind of zoom out a little bit. Sometimes that was making it playful, right? And sometimes that was simply just like, hey, like, let's give us some space. And it sounds like that particular incident was one of the things that certainly shaped that, but it's something I've always been curious about, because your process for how you coached us, like that is such an emotionally charged setting, especially right after a competition. And so to kind of hear you describe how that influenced kind of your process moving forward for those, like, I find that really interesting. And from a player's perspective, I certainly felt that.
Yeah, I always felt, one thing that I think I learned too was, whether I was coaching little leaguers, coaching college, or, the professionals, whatever, I always felt like as a coach, players will meet your expectations. So in other words, if you set high expectations, they'll meet them. But if you set low expectations, they'll also meet them. So as the coach, you're kind of the driver of where this team goes. And so some of those expectations, whether it's to pay attention to detail, and we used to talk about a lot, who's our competition? Our competition is ourself. It's not the team that we're playing. That's not good enough just to say that we beat an okay team. Did we play the game that we were supposed to play? Did we do it the way that we're capable of? That was really kind of the ultimate goal. Those were the expectations, right? And so I always wanted to be careful to, if even after a win, if we didn't meet the expectations of how we're supposed to play, we had to talk about that. But even after a loss, if we did, losses happen. You can play a good game and you can lose. Losses happen. So even if we did, we can talk about that as well. Like, hey, we're okay. Like we did it the right way, and if we keep doing this the right way, we're going to win more often than we're going to lose.
For you, what was that process? And I know you, over the course of time, added more space between, but what was your process for evaluating games? Like you mentioned, what were some of those expectations and standards that you like to hone in on to then make sure that when the moment came for you to address us as a group, you had the right things to say?
Yeah, I think, and when talking to the team, I think a lot of my focus was more on two things: our presence in the dugout. Were we present? Did I look down and see, guys not paying attention, or did I see guys locked in and everybody that had a job was doing their job, talking about the game? So I think that presence, I think, was really important to me. And then I think the bigger picture is execution. We I think those were the things that we'd really talk about, on or out in 4 pitches and just free bases, all the things that we talked about here. This is who we want to be. Did we execute? Did we execute our pitches? Did our batters, did we keep the process together? Did our at-bats look the same with nobody on base than they did with second and third, or the bases loaded, or did all of a sudden we get away from what we were doing because the game sped up on us? So I think it was those type of things, the process-oriented things were the things that we wanted to focus about. The physical things, there was times if I felt like it was from concentration, but very rarely would we talk about physical mistakes, but we would talk about mental mistakes or lack of execution. I think those were the things for me that I processed before going to the team.
And then you mentioned that particular moment, that first year, and how, as you reflected back, how you may have caused that individual player to feel. But I would be curious, like, as your career kind of progressed, like, if you were to retroactively kind of answer the question of, like, how did you want us as players to feel being led by you? How did you answer that?
Oh man, I would hope that a player that played for me felt like I had their back, felt like that I was, with them, whether that performance on the field didn't dictate how I treated them, how I felt about them. That I always felt in baseball, it's really, we can't be front runners. The game is too hard, and there's going to be times where even the best players go through tough times, and so can't change how we treat or how we look at a player based on their performances. So I would hope they felt like that. I hope they felt I was honest. I think I would listen. We're going to have honest conversations. You may or may not always like the answer, but you always know where you stood. They weren't personal. They were they could be personal conversations, but it was about just I hope anyway that's how they felt, that they were honest, and I hope that they felt like they were that there was a clear, I guess, there was always a clear vision on who, the direction we were going, who we wanted to be, and how we were going to get there.
Hmm.
You could probably answer that though, but
I was waiting for you to flip that question around. No, I mean, I would echo a lot of that, and I'm not just saying that, but I think as I reflected back, it's funny because sometimes you don't realize it until down the road. Certain things that now shape what you do, what you believe, and how you do your craft. And although I'm not coaching now from the standpoint of being in a uniform and being in the dugout and managing game decisions and things like how so many coaches are, I still pull from so many of those things that I think you described. And I think one that hits certainly home is like just the honesty piece, like being transparent and not kind of shying away. Because I think one of the things that I've seen now, even being in the role and within kind of mental performance, is how uncertainty can just wreak havoc on somebody. Uncertainty can create a lot of stories. Most of them become untrue,
Hmm.
or are untrue. They can create an urgency, but almost in the form of a panic. And again, just that lack of clarity. One thing I very much admire about our manager in Arizona is Tori. He always talks about like the most important thing for me is when you step into the big league clubhouse, like you can be yourself, right? And I think if you have uncertainty and all those other things, that makes it really difficult. So I share all that because I think I see very much those things that you described, and those parallels with what I get a chance to be around now. I see from both the manager's perspective and how important that is for players too.
Yeah, it's funny you say that just about Tori. And I'd probably say one more thing too, just back to the previous question that I hope too would be, I mentioned honesty, things like that, but I think consistency. I think that's, and again, none of this is earth shattering stuff, but, if you're one thing one day and another thing the next day, and that's, I think, a challenge that leads to some of that uncertainty that you talked about with our players. But for me personally, Tori and I played together for a spell in Oakland. And so it's not surprising that he's managing, and it's not surprising when I watch him how he manages, because it's who he was as a teammate. He was a great teammate. He was, looking out for other guys. He had, it's a tough deal, right? I mean, this is what we hope for our guys. That yes, I mean, we're personally trying to make our living. We're personally trying to stay in the big leagues, to all those things. But can I also see the big picture and care for the guys around me as well? And that's exactly who he was.
Going back to that question, your answer to, is there anything that's similar or different for you and how you wanted like your fellow coaches to feel being led by you? How does that answer change or feel similar for them?
I think it's very similar, honestly. I think it's very similar. Honest communication, that this, again, we will be transparent. Just, yeah, you can't shy away from the hard conversations, because it's at some point they need to be had, right? And if you don't do it, you're just digging a hole. So I think just consistency, I think honesty, all those things I think are very, very similar. I see, as I told them when I took over here, they don't work for me, I work for them. My job is to connect with them. My job is to make their job easier, to support them in any way I can. And so I think it does boil down to some of those same things. Essentially, that's kind of, in its own way, that's how I see being an athletic director. These are my players. This is my team, and so I think we want the same type of communication.
Last year, I was having discussions with a lot of different coaches and staff members, and we were just kind of talking about how things certainly evolve over the course of time. Sometimes our beliefs, our convictions in things can grow over time, or slowly maybe pivot in new ways. And I find that the elite coaches that I feel like I talk to, that tends to be a characteristic or a quality they possess, is they certainly are, they have the utmost belief and trust in themselves, and yet they also know that there's some things that they can hold on to loosely because their minds can change, and opinions can change. So I'm curious for you, like as your career progressed as a coach, what's something that you felt like you used to believe, that you've since changed your mind about, or that you've stopped believing?
Good question. I think this answer may sound more negative than it's meant to. It's not really meant to sound negative, but I guess it does. But I guess one of the things that's changed my mind over time is, like, when I first started coaching, I really believed I could reach everybody. I really believed everybody was going to get on board, that I could reach everybody. And I kind of learned over time that's just not necessarily the case. That there are those who just may not fit in with the organization, or they may not fit with the team because they are just unable or unwilling, no matter how hard we try. So it sounds negative because it sounds like it's a give up, but it's really not, because you only have so much time as a coach. You only have so much time in your day, and you really have to make a decision on where I'm going to expend my time, my energy, my resources, all that. And if the one is taking me away from the 25 that are towing the line, then I think I'm doing a disservice to those. And so I think there comes a time where you do what you can, but when you come to the realization that I just don't think that he's wants to be a part of what we're doing. I think we have to be able to recognize that instead of keep fighting the fight. Because I think I found at times I would spend a lot of time with one or two that, number one, probably weren't going to impact the team on the field, and we're probably going to have a negative impact on the team off the field. And so there comes a time where you just have to recognize that and move on and move forward accordingly.
It makes me think of whether it's for an individual or for a team, commitment is crucial, right? Commitment to the mission, commitment to the purpose, the cause, everything in between. And I think I appreciate that answer in a lot of ways, because I think even for me, reflecting a little bit, you start to realize that commitment also needs to be a two-way street. You can, as a leader, certainly be committed to your people, and at the same time, you can only push or pull, I should say. You can only pull sometimes people for so far, and sometimes you pull so much, you're actually doing more of maybe even a disservice,
Yeah.
not just to them, but even obviously the rest of the group. And so, I find those are certainly challenges. Is how do you help those either find that commitment, or again, maybe they're just, to your point, maybe that's just not alignment with the culture.
Right. Yeah. And exactly right. I mean, it's a two-way street, and I think that's part of it's okay to make those kind of decisions. It's okay to look, and ultimately we're trying to build a team. We want everybody, rowing in the same direction. And if we have one guy that's pulling against it, then it will drag the team down. We need leaders. We need leaders on our team, and so that's part of what we're evaluating is who has the ability to do that, who has the ability to lead, and not necessarily be a vocal, yell, rah type of guy, but by the way they go about it, by the way they treat others. Are they respected, or are they leading others, and so. Because it matters. It really does matter. It matters at your level in the big leagues. There's talent everywhere. Every team has talent, but what separates the good teams from the great teams? And to me, it's those character leadership type things that really become the separator. And so, as a coach, I have a responsibility then. If I have somebody on the team that's not pulling in that direction, then we can't stand for that. If we're being true to everybody else, we can't allow that to happen.
I think that's a really nice segue to the notion of, when you talk about character and leadership, there's kind of this adage that, before you can lead others, it's crucial that you lead yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just kind of curious, as you reflect on that kind of statement, what did that look like for you, or what's your perspective on, leading yourself before leading others?
Yeah, so huge. I think that's probably the most important piece of leadership. You can't ask somebody to do something you're not willing to do yourself. As a leader, we talked about this when you were playing here. As guys moved up from their freshman to sophomore, junior, senior years, the conversation with the seniors is, my expectations are higher for you guys now. And you guys pick up the baseballs, not the young guys. That you guys show by how you go about it. This is who we are. And so it had to start with me. I can't ask you to be on time and then not be on time. I can't ask you to keep your cool out there, but then I can't keep my cool out there. So I think as soon as a leader, if we ask that and don't do it, then we've lost credibility. and as soon as you've lost credibility, you don't have a message anymore. And I think and that is absolutely the case. I don't think there's a place where if the players don't feel that, their coaches are credible, that they're not following. They will choose then to figure out to do their own path. You can't, you hear this a lot. You can't BS a player. You can't. You're around them too much. They can see through it. If it's all a facade, that you're not who you say you are, then you're not leading them. And so I think that's probably the most important element of this. Is I think as leaders we have to hold ourselves to a higher standard than even those that we're leading. But we certainly can't ask them to do something we're not willing to do.
I just had a combo a couple of days ago with a player, and he made the comment. He was like, exactly to your point, like you can't BS them. They're like, we see everything. We know when we have a bad game, and all of a sudden people treat us differently. Like we can, like they sense those things. They can tell when things all of a sudden, like coaches change, and I think that speaks to that. One, what you just described, the importance of leading yourself, but also that consistency piece, right? Like
Yeah,
coaches love consistent players. Well, players love consistent coaches
that's
too,
right. That's
and so again, it kind of goes in both directions.
Yeah, no, very well said. I think and a lot of times, I mean, nobody feels worse about a bad game than the player. You know what I mean? Nobody feels worse. That they're feeling it, and so, but then to turn around and get a cold shoulder or something like that afterwards, it just digs the pit a little bit deeper. And so, yeah, like I said, good or bad, we're in the trenches together out there.
Well, I want to, kind of shift to maybe the fourth quarter of this conversation, or if I guess if we're using baseball, we're closing in on the leverage innings, the late innings. So, but I want to kind of go back to, as I mentioned at the beginning, kind of the role you're in now. We've talked a lot about your origin and journey as a coach and development as a leader, and all the different things that certainly contributed to that. And I think one thing that I really admire about you is just you certainly embody that continuous growth, that continuous learning, and you're still constantly talking about things that you're learning along the way. And so I'm curious, like, as you've now transitioned to this new phase of your career, like I almost view it like you're a multiplier. You're trying to help multiply and amplify the leaders and coaches that are now at Linfield, and coach them. So what are some of the things that you're learning about coaching and leadership in this new role?
Oh man, I think you mentioned the learning piece, right? I just don't think that ever stops. I don't think the learning ever stops. I had a significant one of those aha moments when I was playing, and it was in the '98 All-Star game, and it was the year that I thought I would never make an All-Star team because Cal Ripken got moved. He moved from shortstop to third base, and I'm like, with Cal at third base, I'll never make an All-Star team now. So anyway, we're there, and he walks over to me just before the game. I think it was actually game day, and before the game, and started asking me about like where he takes cutoff. Like how deep do you go down to take your cutoff from left field when the ball's coming in home? How deep do you go? Do you stay out here? Why do you go there? And we had this conversation about this, and so when the conversation ended, kind of two things that hit me. First was like, no way, like Cal Ripken's asking me about like playing third base. But I'm like, here's a guy that's at that point had been in the big leagues for 15 years, whatever he'd been, Hall of Famer, and he's still asking questions. So if Cal Ripken's still asking questions, I can continue to ask questions. And so I think this idea of being a learning. So I ask a ton of questions here. I ask a ton of questions of Jessica and Casey, who are part of my admin team, and of all the coaches. I just ask a lot of questions. I want to know where they're at with how they're feeling about this. Just because I perceive it one way doesn't mean that's the reality. Their perception is kind of the reality. And so I ask a lot of questions. I try to be very collaborative. I don't pretend to have all the answers because I know I don't have all the answers. But together we can find the answers, or we can at least try to find the answers. And so, I think that when I spend time with the coaches, and I'm still learning this, and I think one of the things that I'm still learning about this job is there's a lot of there's a lot of silos in this job. There's, away from the actual competition itself, between budgets, between other things going on campus. And so one of the things I'm still learning is it's easy to get caught in the weeds of a lot of this stuff and then start missing the bigger pieces. For example, in March or in February, I skipped. I skipped our monthly meetings with the coaches. I was so busy with other things that I didn't get them scheduled, and I'm like, that can't happen. Like, because that's one of the most important things I can do is get back to. I need to see my coaches face to face, more often. And so it's a continually learning curve. And I think for me the most important thing that I continue to learn is FaceTime matters. I mean, just keeping a relationship, because again, when there's the separation leads to some of those things that you talked about. Some of the gaps in communication leads to now, okay, they're going to make they're going to create that uncertainty, creates disharmony, creates and down the road we go. And so I think just continually, trying to be just in personal one-on-one conversations, I think really matters. We have to know what's going on in their life, not just what's going on the field or with recruiting or whatever it might be.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds very much like, what you mentioned earlier with players, right? The importance of, hey, yes, you're a player, and we know, like, we all have a timeline for our careers, and it's certainly not going to continue for throughout the duration of our lives. And so we're human beings too, and we have lives outside the lines. And so same thing with coaches, and it sounds like a lot of what you're describing, one, the curiosity with asking questions, but also just recognizing kind of like the whole person in essence, and that like it's not just about who they are as a coach and in essence as a quote unquote performer in their job. It's also though what's happening at home, it's what's happening in their personal lives. Because as we know, like as much as we like to separate those two things, the reality is both bleed into one another, and it's very difficult to not carry one and the other. I remember having a conversation with Chris Peterson, former college football coach. He's going to be on as one of our guests this season, and one of the things that he shared that really resonated was he said, just unfortunately how common it is for us to bring our garbage home and dump it on the table for our spouses and our significant others, and just the challenge with that. And it certainly, again, it can kind of go in both directions, but in being in the role that you are, just simply being open to the fact that, hey, you're a whole person, you're more than just a coach, and there's more to your identity than just what happens here as a coach. It fits with who you were when you were coaching players.
Yeah, and I think we all need to, coaches, all of us, we all need to we need to pay attention to our filter. And what I mean by that is how do we see everything? How do we see our players' actions? How do we see, for me in this role, maybe coaches' actions, whatever? What's my filter? So in other words, I hope, and we've talked about this, and I hope that when they see me, they know that I'm for them. I am for them. So when I look at the coaches, if I know that number one, they're for Linfield, they're for their players, they're for their teams, that filter changes everything, because it's so easy to get caught into like, oh, this particular decision, or they did this, and we can go right to like red level frustration without like, hold on a second. So I know they're for us. So, quick example, I had a coach who asked for time off during a season. Very highly irregular. Wanted to stay. It was a road trip and wanted to stay for a couple more days. And then that means their team wouldn't be practicing here, for a couple days on campus. And I'm like, the first thought was, no, like what is that? That is really irregular. So then I'm like, I just need to find out why. Like what would be driving this? And so what I find is sick dad. I kind of panicked. I felt like I needed to stay and make sure everything was okay. I since found out it was all right, and I'm not going to do that. Well, I mean, that's a huge, for me, that's a huge thing to understand. Changes the whole, that perspective changes the whole conversation. And so I think when I say filter, it's kind of that perspective. It's like, okay, can I have a perspective? Can I have a filter that tries to understand that there's a whole lot more going on in everybody's lives besides just coaching or just playing, that there's other things at play, and we need to find a way to make sure those balance.
Mm, that's great. I wanna kind of shift maybe last few questions here, being respectful of your time. And one thing that I love asking this question. This is a question I'll ask all of our guests, because I think it's fun to hear what people come up with. But I'm curious, like, you've accomplished a lot. Again, player, coach, husband, dad, so many different, roles and things that have been part of your life. What's something though that you're proud of that maybe you don't always get an excuse to talk about or to share?
Hmm. Um, I think my answer is probably gonna go a little bit, maybe a little bit cliche, a little, but I'm proud of the fact that I've been married 36 years, and Jennifer and I still like each other after 36 years. Coaching world is not easy. The playing world is not easy, and you see a lot of marriages that struggle and don't make it through. That world. And so the fact that we still have a healthy marriage relationship, like I said, I joke. I mean, it's the commitment of love is one thing, but to still like each other, to still really look forward to being around each other. We've been able to manage that. She's terrific. Jennifer's terrific, and how she's just supported, a lifestyle that has heavy in hours and things like that. So that I'm proud of, and I'm proud of 3 kids that are living healthy, productive lives. 3 that have graduated from college and have purpose in what they're doing. For me, that feels good. It was like, yeah, we've been able to balance this. We've been able to do something that, for me, it's been an amazing ride that I've got to spend my life in a world that I truly love and I'm passionate about. I've gotten to coach. I've gotten to, you know, coach in other areas. I think the other thing that I don't get to talk about a ton, but just purely on the coaching side, was the times that I've been able to coach for Team USA. I think there's something really special about putting on USA on your jersey and representing your country. Along with those experiences, we got to go and spend time on an Army base. We got to spend time with the Navy SEALs. I have so much respect for those who serve our country, and so for me, those are really proud moments for me. But yeah, don't necessarily get a chance to talk about that too much.
Mm. Those are all very real, very valid, and I kind of want to add one with I want to kind of have you add on top of with your wife, because I think what you described is very real. Like you mentioned, the challenge with anyone's significant other and spouses, and sometimes I think for many in this sport and in this craft, especially in the coaching realm, this is at a lot of different levels. The biggest sacrifices are made by those in our household that are
Hmm.
not us, our kids, our significant others, and so on. So I'm curious. I don't want to frame this as what would be your one piece of advice per se, but I'm curious, like, what was maybe one thing that you felt like that you and Jennifer did that really helped you maintain that love and that liking and that spark?
Yeah, such a good question. I think stuff that I think maybe we developed over time. Again, number one, Jennifer, very understanding. She understands coaching, the role. We'd be at home and she'd ask me something. She goes, you're not here right now, are you? She'd kind of smile like, you're thinking about the game, aren't you? Or whatever it was. I'm like, oh man, yeah, I am. And it's like, so she would get it. But we also were just very purposeful about, listen, and it's the same thing in this job right now. There's always work to take home. It's never done. And so, but can we put it away, and can we be present? And so we did little things. I mean, date nights, and we may have not even left the house, but like every Tuesday night we scheduled, for example, when I was coaching, every Tuesday night was date night. And it might just be going downstairs and eating popcorn and watching Deadliest Catch or whatever it was, but it was carved out. It was a decision that we made to make sure that we had that kind of time, and so another thing too, and this is something I got to learn. I had the opportunity to learn as a player for quite a few years, was don't bring it home. I was better off to stay in a clubhouse another 15 or 20 minutes or whatever time it took to move past the game, to where when I came home, I could be present. And so for the most part, I was able to do that coaching as well. I could come home, and by the time I left, it was like, okay, time to move on with the day, because it's a ball game, and it's really important to us, but it's a ball game. But in again, with the family and things like that, there was other things that I had to be there for. So
I love the idea of you talking about being purposeful with the decision to
mm-hmm.
carve out time, right? Because I think as coaches, we can look at our calendars and it can be full of all the things that we have to do for our teams and with our coaching responsibilities and things. And the one thing that's sometimes not on our calendar is our family. It's all the people at home. And so what I like about that is, because I heard this recently and it very much resonated, that if you are not deliberately carving out time for your family, they're just getting the rest of your time and not the best of your time.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And if you don't make the decision to do that, you're actually making a decision not to. Like, in other words, you don't know that, but you really are. You're making a decision that says, okay, like you said, they just get the leftovers. My team gets the best of me, And I think there has to be a place. Like I said, it's never done. We just have to understand coaching is never done. There's always more to do, and I appreciate. And this is one thing that I've never met the man, but Tony Dungy, when he was coaching, and I remember reading about, he would send his coaches home at a certain time every night, like, just finish when you're done, but go home and be with your families. And we have to be purposeful about it. It has to be a conscious decision. Otherwise, it's just really easy to look up and another week has gone by or another season has gone by, and and that same separation that we don't want from our players, or that gap in communication, we certainly don't want that with our loved ones at home.
Yeah. I'm gonna ask a selfish question now. So I'm curious. So it was, let's see, 2011 through 2014 was my time at Linfield, and in that span, I'm curious, what is at least one, I'm sure there's hopefully multiple, but what is a memory that you feel like that stands out to you the most in that 4-year span that you still very much cherish?
Oh, I think the easiest thing, if you look back behind me there, I think we have the poster on the wall. The easiest thing that comes to mind in the big picture is winning the national championship. I think for me, I had the experience as a player, right? We got to go to 4 World Series, won 3 of them, so I had that experience as a player. I wanted that so much for the guys that I coached. We talked about it all the time. We talked about the dog pile, right? So we talked about what that felt like, what that would feel like at the end of the year when you're the last team standing. And so to do that, obviously that's something, because it just felt so much more, for me personally, it felt so much more fulfilling as a coach than it is a player. As a player, it's pure joy. You're jumping around like a little kid. As a coach, it was just like it's such a proud moment to see the players doing that, and then come back in the campus and how everybody responded. So that, for me, that's a very easy thing to jump to. but more so, I was just so proud of how we went about our business. I was just so proud about how we played. We never showed up other teams. We never, you know what I mean? We did it the way that I always hoped we would do it, with a lot of class, with a lot of pride in how we went about it. But we had fun too. The team got along. It was a good team to be around. It was like, for me as a coach, it was just such a fulfilling that time, because no question, great players, great teams, but great character on the team as well. And so while I talk about the moment of winning the national championship, I was just as proud of the following year when we didn't win. It didn't happen for us, but we still, the way we prepared every day, that we didn't take anything for granted. We did all the things we could have done to get ourselves back to that position. It just didn't happen. And so that was another thing I really appreciated about that team, was we didn't rest on it. It was like, okay, we want more. And so that drive to that passion to compete and to never be satisfied, still for me, that's kind of what I remember about those teams.
I didn't know this word as a player. It's something I've learned in the last few years. There's a book, I believe it's called "Help the Helper," and it's by Kevin Pritchard, who has roots in the NBA as a coach and front office member. And he shared this concept. It's called mudita. And I don't know if you've heard of this concept at all, but mudita is basically this term from Buddhism that kind of means vicarious joy. In other words, that you can find joy in the celebration of other people's success and not just your own.
Yeah.
And it's funny, like for me at least, when I reflect back on those teams, I feel like that very much reverberated, especially in those last couple years. It was very much a team that like we loved just as much, not only when, our everyday stars and contributors were in, but like when all the other guys came in and contributed. Everybody kind of had a moment over the year that did that, and just the seeing like the joy and celebrating one another, like that's something for me that has that I'll always carry.
Yeah, no, that's well said. I think that was the fun of the team, was guys truly cared for each other. We talked about all those things we you strive as a coach to, you hope your teams have. Selflessness, just, yeah, I mean, and I know I said this, and I'll say it again, even as you and I talking, but what you gave up during your career in terms of personal recognition, because we had to pull you from games to get guys into games, because Hadlin and Thomason were pitching so deep into the games, and strategically you had to hold relievers for a final day. So a guy for that 4 years never complained about maybe losing innings that might have cost you personal first team, whatever it might have been. But that's what the team was, guys like you that were willing and just, yes, I want to be a part of something bigger. And I think that's it. If we can get our guys to buy into that, something bigger than ourselves, that it really becomes fun at that point.
Yeah, that's when it gets special. Well, I've really enjoyed this, bro. I've learned some things as I did for 4 years in a row on a daily basis, being around you. So I'm super grateful again for your time in this conversation, and opening up a little bit about some of these things that I feel like I've heard sound bites of, but also certainly some things that were new. So I just want to thank you again, first and foremost, not only for the last hour, but everything else that you've done.
No, I appreciate you having me on. Love the conversation. It's like I said, I like what I'm doing now, but when I start talking about this stuff again, I feel that little urge to be back on the field, and I kind of miss that part of it again. And so, we look back at some those years together, and it's another cliche, but it really were kind of some of the best of times.
Hmm.
Those years here, and those years when we were making the deep runs every year really were kind of the best of times, because I really believe we kind of did it the right way. So it's been
Yeah,
fun to talk about it.
yeah,
Yeah.
cool, awesome. Well, thank you again for your time, and looking forward to staying connected with you as you as you again you continue to navigate this new role and being a multiplier
Yeah,
at our alma mater.
I appreciate it. Hopefully we can
Yeah,
talk again. Appreciate it,
yeah,
Zach. Okay.
cool.